Okay, we're going to run through these pretty quickly if I can. Just a couple follow-up details. And this first one is with regard to that relocated sliding patio door. And all of these upper transom windows are going to be the same size, 15 1/4 high. And they're all meant to come up right to the bottom of that existing 1x6 frieze out there. And this is pretty accurate here, but it's not within 1/8 of an inch, it's more within 1/4. And so we come in here a little closer, but first of all, with regard to joining these windows in general and the plans specifically. First of all, with regard to joining in general, but in particular joining the old Anderson, I'm assuming that's an Anderson narrow line gliding patio door, joining that with the new A-series transom window. But joining in general, these use up spaces, as you could tell, and you can see they look like they work pretty easily, but they do add 3/4 of an inch space vertically. So that's one thing to consider with regard to mauling all those others. I don't have a disclaimer in the plans yet, I probably will add it, but all of those rough openings are not based upon this 3/4 inch joining clip. So their sills will be lowered, is how I would do it. Lower their sills by 3/4 of an inch if I was to do it that way. But with regard to the transom window, you won't be able to join that directly and keep it aligned where we want to at the top. On that one, they suggest putting a piece of LVL between, horizontally flat, between the transom and the door. And in the section view of that door transom situation, this is shown in the drawings, and you can adjust this LVL really from 1 1/4 to 1 3/4, and you could pad it as well if you need. But that is what has to happen there to keep that held up where it needs to be and to support it, because they don't want you resting it on that door. Now, with regard to these headers over this is one of these braced wall panel situations, and they require a minimum 2x12 headers, two 2x12 headers, and that's what that's shown there. There's the unit 15 1/4, and it has just a 3/8 space up here. So all of this has to be accounted for going downward on these. But if you wanted to, and I don't know if it's worth it, right now you have these little legs up here, these little 2 5/8 legs. If you want to just go to 14-inch LVLs, maybe resaw them to 13 3/4 and just have that all solid, you can do that. But it doesn't matter, either way is acceptable. The important thing is when these two members are put in, these two 2x12s are put in, or whatever is used there, and it can be two 11 1/4 LVLs for that matter. But if it's just lumber, and it can be just SPF lumber, the 1/2 inch spacer is put to the inside, and then at a couple locations on each of these panels there are straps put on the inside face of those studs. This is a quick detail of how I dealt with that trim at the ceiling. In the final detailed analysis, I have it coming down and turning, and I don't think there's another way you can make this a different kind of a piece that interfaces with that in a more angular fashion. But that's how I did it there, and so you have that at the other end looking straight on. When I began to specify the actual folding door and its model number and what I should call that, I found out that we have been using this folding out swinging door I've been showing folding out swinging door because that's what we had originally thought, that we'd be folding that outward. But I've been showing this from their Big Doors series, and as it turns out, the one we actually want is this beefy bifold door, and you can see how it folds, and it looks like, that track is dead center in your framed opening, and half of the thing comes inside and half goes out. So this is probably not going to project into the room more than maybe 12 inches. 12 inches in and 12 inches out from the center of that framed wall. So I thought that was great news as far as that went. And that changed things here, I think, in a good way. This was as good as I had arrived when we were doing it this way with this casing outside. But given what I could find about that beefy bifold it looked like it was only going to be a 4-inch frame and fit in practically any wall. So I don't think we're going to need any of this casing and bric-a-brac out here. And that goes back to a simple brick opening. I don't know if this is the best thing with this case or this baseboard coming across here. And also at the moment I think you have a brick sill that projects. So I don't know if that brick sill is removed and maybe flooring is run up here, but that'll have to be dealt with. But in any event, I now show in the drawings, I don't show any casings or anything like that on this door out here. I am showing a switch here because I didn't think it made sense to have to step across the room to turn on the lights when you first come in. So I show extra switches over there for that event. The other thing, I lowered this a little bit from 9'10" to 9'8", and show in the drawings what we want to do is align that, the bottom of that lintel, we want that aligned with the top of this casing. Now I just want to clarify a few things with regard to a couple different things. First of all of the framing dimensions that I'm showing down through here, these are based on a rough opening that is listed as these model numbers minimum rough opening, which is essentially 3/8 on each side. And in terms of the height, you will have to actually adjust that according to whatever it takes to join those windows. The way I'm showing it now though, with this 7 1/4 inch frame outside to outside on that frame, is when that's all said and done, the window and the 2'11" 1/4 window is put in there, you're going to end up with 1 brick's width going up, 7 5/8 going up. And this should definitely be sorted out before it's framed with whoever the mason is in terms of what kind of width works best for them. Maybe that has to be a little wider, maybe it has to be a tiny bit smaller, I don't know. But that should be definitely figured out first. And on this end, it's, this end we don't really have a lot of room to work with. But once this is done, these pillars will finish at 11 5/8. And I think that was all there was on that. Really, I just wanted to be clear on those rough openings. Finally, with regard to this lighting, this is just the lighting plan I showed, and I'm just showing these cans, this group of cans. And that's another thing, that ceiling's so high that the proper research should be done on what kind of a fixture it's going to take to get that light down where you want it. And so that's one thing to think about, is these aren't, I don't think you can just use your standard discs up here and expect that to do anything down even at mid-level, even at eye level. But I show them in 2 groups, and you can group these however you want, and I have a blank plan to horse around with in terms of how you want to switch things. I also show 2 empty switches here that can be used for outdoor switching or additional inside switching. But yeah, in terms of them, they were going to be into this so much, and they were going to have the mason doing so much, it was nothing to cut an extra double box in here so that you can just, if you're leaving the room and you're halfway out there, or you're ready out here and you want to turn out the lights, you can just reach out and turn them out. But the other thing I want to mention with regard to the lighting itself, when maybe you're going to add some additional lighting fixtures to this, and I would suggest, if it's possible, to have some sort of fixture that shines light upward. Sometimes this is where a fan or fans are helpful, because you can get those with uplights to light that ceiling, that high, beautiful ceiling, to get that lit so that it can be seen, and that will make it even higher. And because all these down lights actually bring the ceiling down, because of the glare, I guess. In any event, that's the theory. And a couple of sconces, 1, 2, I don't know, some sort of uplighting on this gable wall, but that is just a suggestion as far as that goes. There's probably also a good argument to be made, if a person is inclined that way, to use track lighting as well. There's just so many different alternatives with regard to that. But those are just a few of the things I wanted to mention with regard to that whole lighting and any further assistance you need with it, I'll do what I can. The final bit is this framing details. I included these wall framing diagrams for a couple of these walls, and one's almost like the other. The east and the west are similar, but this shows how you have to frame these walls, and you can read that yourself and sort it out. But you can see what they generally want you to do is the header, these two LVLs, are run all the way past the beginning of the opening, and then this is the treatment at that end. And then there are straps added to the inside of the wall, the inside face of the wall. And so this is a similar thing here. We want to try to get this for this to fly more or less, because you see they would want this actually to be the 11 1/4 all the way over and down. So I designed this whole diagram here because I knew that this would pass. An engineer would look at this and say that it's going to work in the event they give us some sort of a headache about it. And frankly, I don't think they will. So because that whole thing, that whole corner's put together as ridiculously stout, because these two corners are meeting, these two overbuilt corners are meeting. You know, there's a lot of nails, so they throw a lot of nails at this, and at these corners it's every 3 inches, and on at least 2 of those members going up and down. At these regular braced wall panels, however, these, the only extra requirement beyond the normal nailing, which the code requires you to nail this sheeting 6 inches on the edge and 12 inches in the field, regardless. So all over the building, that's what it gets nailed at. But at the braced wall panel, you have to provide horizontal blocking where you join your OSB sheeting. And that is it on as far as those go. This one here, I'm just adding this. I don't show it in here, but I would use as much nails as you like. But I'm also showing the layout of these plywood. And I'm showing the studs at 16 inches on center laid out from east to west going this way. This is looking at from the outside. And so you can see the panels, the plywood 4x8s here. And I come down from the top with those here so that we have this all one solid piece at that corner there. And we have a nice solid piece here. And then the same thing is done here. You just have to shift it a little to account for that 16-inch centering. And then the infill is this 16-inch piece here and up in here. But I think that's going to be, this is what I know the engineer, if it comes down to an engineer having to approve this, I know that this will be approvable. I apologize, but there was one other thing that occurred to me. And it was just that the spacing on these side windows, that started out kind of based on those ones that are by the stairs there, and kind of loosely based on whether there was going to be sculptural beams at the ceiling level. So those were held to that 8 inches. But these are 11 here. And when these are held to 8 inches here, the room is kind of divided up like that, 11 foot 10 and 12 foot 10. But if you wanted to make these margins here the same as these, the 11 1/2 or whatever it's going to end up being, and shift that over like that, then you have the room division like that. So if that's something, and then probably move the door over as well. And that would be kind of the room division there if you wanted to do that instead of these 8-inch spaces. And how that looks from the outside, I'll just give you those 2 quick comparisons of those 8-inch spaces here and the 11 inches. Nothing changes over here. And then here's the progression. These are those 8-inch spaces here, or 8-inch columns. And that moves those to 11 inches. And then the door is kind of slid over that same bit. Because that bit in the corner is really not going to be, I don't know where that is right now, but that's not going to be that used anyway. So that's what I did on that side, and if you agree, that's fine. It's nothing to change those drawings around. And then from this end, we knew what that was. And from here was the 8-inch ones, and I don't know why the brick color changes, and with the 12 inches. And I don't know if you can live with that floor plan thing, but I kind of think this is probably a more a pure outcome or approach to the thing. rather than having these skinnier ones like that. But you know, either one I think is working just fine. But I did want to throw that into it at the very end here. That is all. Thank you very much. It's been my pleasure.